Not that he was thinking of the mouse. The flow of blood from its snout brought him back to his preoccupation. His wife, who has been ill for a year, is going to rest tomorrow at a sanatorium in the mountains. When he got home, he found his wife lying down, following his advice, so that he could endure the difficult journey to come. She smiles. I feel very comfortable. She turned to face her husband, in the light of the bedside lamp. For Rio, that 30-year-old face, despite the signs of illness, was still the face of youth, perhaps because the smile erased all others. Try to sleep, he said. At 11 o'clock the midwife will come and I will take you to the 10 train. 2 hours. He gently kissed a sweaty forehead. When he got to the door, he still saw his wife smiling. The next day, April 17, at 8 o'clock, when the doctor was passing by, the old man at the gate stopped him and accused him of mischief, having thrown 3 dead rats in the middle of the corridor. They must have hit the rats with great traps, for all 3 were drenched in blood. The old man stood on the threshold for a moment, with a few mice in his hand, waiting to see if he could hear the killer's mocking laughter. But nothing happened. Ah, boys, Meeson exclaimed, "I'll catch them by the throat." Confused, Rio decided to begin a tour of the suburban streets, where his poorest sick people lived. There, people collect garbage late. His car drove along the straight, dusty roads, gliding next to the trash cans on the side of the road. On the way past, he counted 12 dead rats in piles of discarded greens and dirty rags. The first patient Rio visited was lying in bed, in a room facing the street that was both a bedroom and a dining room. An old Spanish man, austere, wrinkled face. In front of the old man, on a blanket, were 2 pots filled with beans. When the doctor came in, the old man, half lying down, half sitting, leaned back to regain the wheezing, weary breath of a sick man. Perennial asthma. The wife brought a basin. Doctor, the patient said while giving the injection, they ran out, do you see? Yes, the wife continued, the house next door picked up 3 children. The old man rubbed his hands together. They ran out, there are trash cans everywhere, they must be hungry. Later, Rio heard the whole town stir up about rats. After visiting the hospital, he returned home. The doctor has a telegram, upstairs, old Meeson informed him. He asked if he had seen any more rats. Ah, no, said the old man, I am watching, do you understand? And the bastards don't dare anymore. The telegram said that the old lady who gave birth to Rio was coming tomorrow. He came to take care of his son's house while his daughter-in-law was away. When the doctor got home, the midwife was already there. Rio saw his wife standing, dressed in the same color, her face smeared with powder. He smiled. Good, he said, very good. After a while, when he got to the station, he took his wife to the car with a bed. She looked at the train carriage. Too much money for us, isn't it? It must be, replied Rio. What's with that rat thing? You don't know. It's weird, but it will pass. Then he quickly told his wife that he was sorry, he was supposed to take care of her, but he was late. She shook her head, as if to tell him not to. But he added, When I come back, everything will be better. We will start again. Yes, she replied, her eyes shining, we will begin again. A moment later, she turned her back and looked through the window. On the platform, people jostled and jostled each other. The humming sound of the locomotive reached their ears. Rio called his wife by her first name, and when she turned around, he found her covered in tears. "Come on," he said softly. The smile returned, but the lips were slightly pursed, and there were no tears on the face. She sighed deeply. "Come on, go home, everything will be fine." He kissed his wife, and now, standing on the platform, he could only glimpse her smile behind the glass door. "I beg you," he said, "you have to take care of your health." But she did not hear. On the platform, near the entrance, Rio met Otto, the judge, holding his young son by the hand. He asked if he was traveling. Otto, a tall man, dressed in black, looked as affluent as they used to be, but at the same time looked like a funeral attendant. In a gentle voice, he replied succinctly, "I went to pick up Mrs. Otto from visiting family." The locomotive whistles. "The rats?" Otto asked. Rio looked in the direction of the train and then back towards the entrance. "Yes," he replied, "it's okay." He recalled that at that time a sweeper passed by, carrying a box full of dead rats. That afternoon, at the beginning of the examination, Rio received a young man whom he knew to be a journalist and who had come to see him once in the morning. His name is Raymond Ramby. Short, broad-shouldered, stern-faced, bright-eyed, and intelligent, Ramby wore athletic clothes and seemed to live an affluent life. He got straight to the point. A large newspaper in Paris assigned him to investigate the life of the Arabs, and he wanted to gather information about their health situation. Ryu said the situation was not good. But before going further, would you like to know if journalists are allowed to tell the truth? Of course. Ramby replied. I mean, can you direct criticism? Straight hand is not, to say so clearly. But I think such criticism would be unfounded. Rio gently replied that yes, such a criticism was unfounded, but asking the question above, he just wanted to know, in confirming the truth, whether Ramby had to be wary of anything. I only accept confirmations without hesitation. So I won't use my information to back up your claim. You speak like green Jewess, replied the journalist, smiling. Without raising his voice, Rio said he did not know anything about St. Jewess words, but that his words were those of a man who was fed up with the society he lived in, though he loved his fellow man and decided. Do not accept injustice and make concessions. Ramber shrank back to look at him. I think I understand you, he said at last, and stood up. The doctor saw him out the door. I thank you for having such a view of the situation. Ramby looks impatient. Yes, he replied, I understand, I am sorry I bothered you. The doctor shook his hand and said he could write an interesting report on the number of dead rats in the city right now. Ah, that amused me, said Ramby hastily. At 7 o'clock, when going out to visit other patients, Dr. Ryu met in the middle of the stairs a young man, chubby, big face, sunken cheeks, bushy eyebrows. Occasionally, he would meet him at the Spaniards' dancing houses and on the top floor of the building. John Taru was engrossed in a cigarette while gazing at a dead rat on one of the stairs at his feet. He looked up at the doctor with ash-colored eyes, calm and somewhat attentive, greeting him and adding that the appearance of rats was strange. "Yes," replied Rio, "but it will annoy us in the end." "In a way, doctor, and only in a certain way. We've never seen anything like this, that's all. But for me, it was very interesting, yes, really interesting." Taru pushed back his hair with his hand, looked at the now motionless mouse, again, and smiled at Rio. "But, doctor, that's mostly the job of the old janitor." At that moment, the doctor met the old man standing in front of the house, leaning against the wall next to the door. His face, which was usually congested, now looked tired. "Yes, I know," said Meeson to the doctor when he told him of a new discovery. "Now, I can pick up 2 or 3 children at once. But the same goes for other houses." The old man looked depressed and worried. Instinctively, the old man rubbed his neck with his hand. Rio asked him how he was doing. Of course, he couldn't say it wasn't good. But he felt uneasy. According to him, the main thing is mental disturbance. The rats had given him a blow and the situation must have been much better now that they were gone. But the next morning, April 18th, when he picked up his mother from the station, Rio saw old Meeson, with a more depressed face. From the cellar to the attic, on the stairs, there were a dozen dead rats. The trash cans around the houses were also full of rat corpses. The old woman, Rio's mother, when she heard the news, did not show any surprise. Those are the things that still happen. The old woman was a petite woman with silver hair and gentle black eyes. "I am glad to see you, Berna," he said. "The rats were unstoppable." Rio agrees. Indeed, for him, everything seemed easy. But he still called the rat extermination agency of the town of which he knew the director. "Has this man heard people say that rats die in flocks in the open air?" Director Mercier had heard of it, and even in his office, not far from the docks, there were 50. But he thought he didn't know if the situation was serious. Rio did not have a definite opinion, but he thought there must be the intervention of the rat extermination agency. "Yes," said Mercier, "but there must be an order. If you think it should be done, I can ask for orders." "You should do it," replied Rio. The housemaid came to tell him that several hundred dead rats had been found in the large factory area where her husband worked. Anyway, at this time, people started to panic. Because, indeed, since the 18th, factories and warehouses are full of hundreds of rat corpses. There are cases when people are forced to kill the animals. Prolonged respiration. But from the suburbs to the center of the city, wherever Rio passed, wherever our compatriots gathered, rats swarm in heaps, in trash cans, or in long lines, along the creeks. That very day, the afternoon press took stock of the situation and questioned whether the town hall intended to operate or not and what urgent measures were planned to rid the population of the disgusting intrusion. The city council has not had any intentions and plans, but has just begun to meet to discuss. The Rat Extermination Agency received an order to pick up the dead rat's body. Mornings, at dawn. When finished, 2 vehicles of this agency have to bring the rat carcass to incineration plant for incineration. But in the days that followed, the situation worsened. The number of mice picked up is increasing day by day. From the 4th day, the rats began to die in flocks. From nooks and crannies, underground structures, cellars, and sewers, they stagger in long swarms to stagger outdoors, spin around and die beside people. At night, in the corridors or in the alleys, their squealing sounds can be heard clearly in their dying agony. In the morning, in the doorways, people see them rolling out right by the stream. 1. Small blood stains on the sharp snout. The child is swollen, stinking. The child is stiff. The mustache is still standing. Even in the inner city, they are found in great numbers, on the steps or in the courtyard. They also die sporadically in the corridors of offices, in school playgrounds and sometimes even on the patios of cafes. Our compatriots were horrified to encounter them in the most crowded places in the city. The parade square, the boulevards, the flower garden on the beach, every step of the way, were littered with dead rats. Early in the morning, people went to collect all the bodies, but later, during the day, more and more corpses were found. On the sidewalk, many people walking in the evening felt at their feet the soft mass of a recently dead rat carcass. People think that under the houses, the ground is washed out. Its fluid volume and raised it above the boils that had hitherto been smoldering in the earth. Readers can't help but imagine the horror of our small town, which had been so quiet until now, but after only a few days, it became as chaotic as a healthy human being. Suddenly boiling hot. The situation progressed to such an extent that during a broadcast that they could not guarantee, the company Rangsdok, which provides information on all subjects, announced that on the 25th day alone, 6,231 animals had been collected and burned. Mouse. This number clearly shows the daily scene before your eyes. The city and added to the atmosphere of panic. Up to that point, people had only complained about a somewhat heinous event. Recently, this phenomenon of not being able to define and find its source has something of a menace. Only the old Spaniard with asthma continued to massage. Rubs his hands and repeats, "We're out with an old joy."